Tonight, a dramatic and potentially historic decision has just come down from the United States Supreme Court, and it could reshape the future of American trade policy. In a major legal defeat for former President Donald Trump, the nation's highest court has ruled against his sweeping global tariffs, a cornerstone of his economic strategy. This decision strikes directly at one of the most aggressive trade policies implemented in recent years, a policy that affected businesses, consumers, and governments across the globe. What makes this ruling even more significant is how long the country has been waiting for it. For months, legal experts, economists, and policymakers have been watching closely as the case moved through the courts. Now the decision is finally here, and the consequences could be enormous. But here's what makes this story even more dramatic. The tariffs that were just struck down generated hundreds of billions of dollars and influenced global trade relationships. And tonight, serious questions are emerging about what happens next. Will businesses get their money back? Could new tariffs replace the old ones? And how will the markets react in the coming days? Stay with us, because what the Supreme Court just decided could impact everything from the price of everyday goods to America's relationship with the rest of the world. Let's begin with the key question many Americans are asking tonight. What exactly did the Supreme Court decide, and why does it matter so much? The court ruled that Donald Trump's global tariffs, which were imposed using federal emergency powers, went beyond the authority of the presidency. In simple terms, the justices concluded that the law used to justify these tariffs was not designed for sweeping economic actions like the ones we saw. These tariffs were not small adjustments to trade policy. They applied broadly to dozens of countries and covered a wide range of imported goods. The administration argued that the tariffs were necessary to protect American economic interests and respond to unfair trade practices. But the court found that emergency powers cannot be used as a substitute for congressional approval. That distinction is critical. Under the Constitution, Congress is given the authority to regulate taxes and trade. The ruling reinforces that presidents cannot bypass lawmakers when making large-scale economic decisions. But here's the part many viewers may not realize. This decision does not necessarily mean tariffs are gone forever. Instead, it means the process must change. Any future tariffs of this scale may now require approval from Congress, which could dramatically slow down how trade policies are implemented. And that raises a bigger question. How did these tariffs begin in the first place?
To understand the importance of this ruling, we need to go back to the beginning of Donald Trump's tariff strategy. From the start, tariffs were more than just economic policy. They were a central part of his political and diplomatic approach. Trump repeatedly described tariffs as a powerful negotiating tool that could pressure other countries into making trade concessions. One of the most memorable moments came during what he called Liberation Day, when a sweeping set of tariffs was announced at the White House. Standing in front of reporters, Trump presented a list of countries and the tariff rates they would face. Some of those numbers were striking. A baseline tariff of 10% applied broadly, but many countries faced much higher rates. The European Union saw tariffs around 20%. Japan faced rates above 20% as well. India was hit with even higher levels. Some smaller economies faced tariffs approaching 50%. And China, America's largest economic rival, became the central focus of the policy. At certain points, tariffs between the United States and China escalated to levels above 100% when countermeasures were included. Trump argued that these tariffs would strengthen American manufacturing and reduce trade deficits. Supporters believed they would protect American workers. Critics warned they would raise prices and disrupt supply chains. But the real question now is not whether tariffs worked, it's whether they were legal.
At the heart of the Supreme Court's decision is a fundamental constitutional issue: who actually has the authority to impose tariffs in the United States? According to the Constitution, the power to regulate trade and impose taxes belongs primarily to Congress. Presidents do have certain emergency authorities, but those powers are limited and must be used carefully. In this case, the court determined that the law used to justify the tariffs was intended for genuine national emergencies, not long-term economic policy. The administration argued that trade imbalances and global competition represented economic threats to the country, but the justices ultimately concluded that this interpretation stretched the law too far. The ruling makes clear that emergency powers cannot replace the legislative process. If a president wants to impose broad tariffs affecting dozens of countries, the proper path is to work with Congress to pass legislation. That process may be slower and more complicated, but it ensures that major economic decisions receive democratic oversight. Perhaps the most surprising element of the decision is the composition of the court. Several conservative justices joined the majority ruling against Trump's policy. That signals that the case was viewed primarily as a constitutional issue rather than a political one. And this decision could have lasting implications far beyond tariffs.
The immediate impact of this decision could be felt across the American economy. Businesses that import goods into the United States were the ones who actually paid the tariffs, and many of them passed those costs on to consumers through higher prices. Now those companies are asking a critical question: will they be entitled to refunds? Legal experts say the answer is still unclear. The ruling invalidates many of the tariffs going forward, but it does not automatically resolve what happens to the money that has already been collected. That could lead to years of additional court battles as companies seek compensation. Another major issue is uncertainty. Over the past year, many businesses changed their supply chains in response to the tariffs. Companies moved production, shifted suppliers, and renegotiated contracts. Now they must decide whether to reverse those changes or prepare for new policies. There is also the question of government revenue. Tariffs generated hundreds of billions of dollars, which helped offset federal deficits. Without that income, policymakers may need to find other sources of funding, and the economic ripple effects may only be beginning.
Financial markets are often the first place where major economic news is reflected, and investors around the world are now reacting to the Supreme Court's decision. Early trading showed mixed signals, with some major indexes moving higher while others remained relatively stable. Analysts say this cautious reaction reflects both optimism and uncertainty. On one hand, some investors believe the ruling could reduce trade tensions and make global commerce more predictable. Businesses generally prefer stable rules and clear regulations, and this decision may provide a more structured framework for future trade policy. That stability could encourage investment and economic growth. On the other hand, uncertainty remains about what policies might replace the tariffs that were struck down. If new tariffs are introduced under different legal authorities, markets could face renewed volatility. Investors are watching closely for signals from Washington about the administration's next move. Another factor is expectations. Many traders anticipated this ruling, meaning some of the impact may already be reflected in market prices. But the biggest market movements may still lie ahead.
Attention is now turning to how Donald Trump may respond to this major legal setback. Throughout his political career, tariffs have been one of his most consistent policy tools. He has used them not only to address trade issues, but also to pressure other countries on a wide range of political disputes. In recent statements, Trump warned that a negative ruling could have serious consequences for the country. He argued that tariffs generated vital revenue and strengthened America's negotiating position. but he has also suggested that alternative approaches may be available if the court ruled against him. Those alternatives could include tariffs imposed under national security laws or other trade provisions that have already survived legal challenges. Some sector-specific tariffs, including those on steel and aluminum, remain in place and could serve as a model for future actions. Advisors close to Trump have indicated that contingency plans were developed in anticipation of this decision. That suggests the administration may move quickly to implement new measures. And if new tariffs are introduced, the legal battles could begin all over again.
Beyond economics, this decision carries significant political implications. Trade policy has long been a defining issue in American politics, and tariffs remain a powerful symbol of economic nationalism. The Supreme Court's ruling could influence future debates about presidential authority and the role of Congress. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are now likely to face pressure to take a more active role in trade policy. If large-scale tariffs require congressional approval, future administrations may need to build political coalitions before implementing similar measures. That could change the balance of power between the executive branch and the legislative branch. The decision may also become a major talking point in political campaigns. Supporters of stronger trade protections may argue that Congress should act quickly to restore tariffs, while critics may use the ruling as evidence that the previous approach went too far. Perhaps most striking is the fact that the ruling came from a court with a conservative majority. That underscores the legal seriousness of the case and may make the decision harder to dismiss as purely political. And the political debate is likely just beginning.
The effects of this decision extend far beyond the United States. Governments around the world have been closely watching the legal battle over American tariffs, and many of them adjusted their policies in response. Some countries negotiated new trade agreements in order to avoid higher tariff rates, while others imposed retaliatory tariffs on American exports. Now those arrangements may need to be reconsidered. If the tariffs that helped shape these agreements are no longer valid, some countries may seek to renegotiate the terms. That could create new diplomatic challenges and new economic opportunities. International businesses are also affected. Companies that export goods to the United States must now reassess pricing strategies and production plans. Lower tariffs could make American markets more attractive, but uncertainty about future policies may limit long-term investments. Trade relationships with major partners, such as China and the European Union, could be particularly sensitive. These relationships have already experienced periods of tension, and any policy changes could shift the balance again. In a global economy, decisions made in Washington often have worldwide consequences.
Tonight's Supreme Court decision marks a turning point in the debate over American trade policy. A single legal ruling has changed the course of one of the most ambitious economic strategies in recent history. But the story is far from over. The administration still has options, Congress may step in, and businesses will continue to adapt. In the coming weeks and months, new policies and new legal battles could reshape the situation once again. For now, one thing is clear. The balance of power between the presidency and Congress has been reaffirmed, and the rules governing trade policy may never be quite the same. The biggest question now is what happens next. Will new tariffs emerge under different laws? Will businesses seek refunds? And will this decision reshape America's role in the global economy? This ruling may have ended one chapter, but the next chapter could be even more important.